No populism, no freebies, no handouts. The 2024 interim budget was a budget confident of a third Modi victory. Both the finance minister and the prime minister himself declared that they will bring a proper full budget when they come back in July.
A confident stride. Popularity weighs over populism.
I present the interim budget for 24-25.
The Modi government's economic manifesto before the general elections.
The Indian economy.
Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman unveiled the interim budget for 2024-25. The Modi government, at the fag end of its second term, rolled out plans for long-term reforms and infrastructure development.
With the whole-of-nation approach of Sabka Prayas, the country overcame the challenges of once-in-a-century pandemic, took long strides towards Atmanirbar Bharat, committed to Panch Pran, and laid solid foundations for the Amrit Kal. As a result, our young country has high aspirations, pride in its present, and hope and confidence for a bright future. Are periodically increased.
The interim budget in the Lok Sabha signalled the Modi government's pre-poll assurance of another 5-year in power.
All castes and people at all levels. We expect that our government, based on its stupendous work, will be blessed again by the people with a resounding mandate. An assurance that benefits are delivered.
The interim proposals shied away from populist measures, leaving direct and indirect tax slabs untouched. The finance minister instead laid out a vision for the future of the country's young demography.
Farmers are our annadata. For our tech-savvy youth, this will be a golden era. A corpus of 1 lakh crore rupees will be established with 50-year interest-free loan. The corpus will provide long-term financing or refinancing with long tenors and low or nil interest rates. This will encourage the private sector to scale up research and innovation significantly in sunrise domains. We need to have programs that combine the powers of our youth and technology.
The interim budget presentation for the new fiscal became an occasion for the Modi government to highlight its achievements.
It is now appropriate to look at where we were then, till 2014, and where we are now, only for the purpose of drawing lessons from the mismanagement of those years. The government will lay a white paper on table of the House. Challenge of the pre-2014 era.
The finance minister's limited populist pitch included the announcement of 2 crore new houses and the extension of Ayushman Bharat to Asha and Anganwadi workers.
Healthcare cover under Ayushman Bharat scheme will be extended to all Asha workers, to all Anganwadi workers and helpers.
An 11.11% increase in capital expenditure was announced, focusing on improving railways and air travel.
3 major economic railway corridor programs will be implemented. These are energy, mineral and cement corridor, expansion of existing airports and development of new airports will continue expeditiously. 30.03 lakh crore rupees.
The finance minister's announcement centered around social justice and women's welfare.
Reflecting strong growth momentum, making triple talaq illegal, reservation of 1/3 seats for women in the Lok Sabha and state assemblies, and giving over 70% houses under PM Awas Yojana in rural areas to women as sole or joint owners have enhanced their dignity. For our government, social justice is an effective and necessary governance model. The saturation approach of covering all eligible people is the true and comprehensive achievement of social justice. This is secularism in action, reduces corruption, and prevents nepotism, prevents Bhai Bhatijawad.
A budget seemingly designed to reveal the Modi government's confidence in a future under its leadership. Bureau Report, India Today.
In a short while from now, we'll go across live to three senior ministers of the Modi government joining us on this broadcast. We'll have Union Civil Aviation Minister Jyotiraditya Scindia, Telecom and IT Minister Ashwini Vaishnav, and we'll have Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal. So a heavyweight panel joining us on this special broadcast. I want to get a word in from Dr. Rajiv Kumar, who headed the Niti Aayog. We got Subhash Garg, who's been secretary in the government in the Ministry of Finance, has been involved in the process of making several budgets. As people tune in this evening, Dr. Rajiv Kumar, what is it that about this budget pleased you the most, and what is it that you think the government and the finance minister could have done differently?
Surprisingly, one of the things that I thought was very good was this setting aside 1 lakh crore of corpus for a 50-year-long,
But Mr. Chidambaram asked, where's the outlay for this? He says you've just kind of mentioned this figure without giving the money.
This is nitpicking, and this will happen. If the finance minister announces that in a budget, this happens. And and not all of that 1 lakh crore is required to be placed up front on the table. But the announcement, the idea behind that, which is to encourage R&D, which is so weak in our country, and then to especially target it to the young, innovators and entrepreneurs. I think that's a new one. I mean, let me put it like this: that's a new one. So that's one very pleasing for me. The other one that I really liked was, the target for creating 3 crore female Lakpatis. Again, I think because that will involve creating female entrepreneurs. And that's a very big one, because that's not just handing out money, that's actually creating entrepreneurs, even at sort of small level. But so those are the two good ones.
Subhash Garg, what about you?
So I thought the absence of populism, rhetoric, handouts was a good standout point. Some movement towards fiscal consolidation was also a good positive. The continued emphasis on the capex was also a kind of positive thing. But what was not that good was what was not spoken about. One, the income generation, employment, jobs was completely missing.
So let me explain that. Through the word count, which has now gone viral, a lot of focus on what the finance minister spoke about and what the finance minister didn't speak about. So I'll just walk across the budget intelligence dashboard and show that to our viewers right now. So if you look at the word cloud for this budget, she speaks of the following things most often. She's speaking of taxation 42 times. She's speaking of Prime Minister 42 times. She's spoken of policy 35 times, Bharat 24 times, scheme 16 times, farmer 15, food 11 times. The opposition using this word count to say, but job or employment ki to baat hi nahi ho rahi hai.
And one more thing which I found conspicuous by absence was the big ticket program of the government, the PLI. PLI seems to be performing very poorly. I just did the counting after we dispersed at 2 o'clock. The actual expenditure in 22-23 is 1,000 rupees less than what was decided in the RE, and that itself was at a very low level of 3,800 crores. And same story seems to be continuing in 23-24. Very low disbursement. What it seems to be, except 2 or 3 PLIs, the telecom one and one on the pharma side, and some on the food. So just 1 minute. So the 6 years program.
Which ones do you think are not working?
Rest everything is not working.
You think telecom is working?
Only telecom and the pharmaceutical seems to be.
Why
working.
the others not working?
others, many of them have no takers, and many schemes actually should have been there. Toys, leather, those
You want to
kind of
respond to
things.
that, Rajiv Kumar, that
Yeah,
if you go sector-wise, production-linked incentive is not working in several sectors?
I think it's working. I think it's just a matter of selection of the enterprises and their targets. 3,269 crore is the actual disbursement for 23-24, and the budget has been doubled to more than 6,500 crores for the next year. Now that must be for good reason.
Okay.
That they know that
The
these things are
allocation,
coming.
Rajiv, is 1.97 lakh crores over 5 years.
Yeah.
We have not, including the current year, done even 5,000 crores. We have done
That's an
only
important point.
3,000
I'll put
crores.
that question to some of the
3
ministers
years
who will be
ago.
joining us. I want to start with Union Minister for Civil Aviation, Jyotiraditya Scindia, who's joining us on this broadcast. Minister Scindia, welcome. Can you, at the outset, give our viewers a sense of what to expect from your ministry, civil aviation, in the year to come? What is it that's on the verge of takeoff, landing and delivery? What should viewers really look out for from Minister Scindia this year?
Well, Rahul, thank you for having me on the show. Before I do that, I think just to give you a little bit of an overview, and through you, our viewers as well, in terms of this budget. As we all know, that this was a vote on account budget. But at the same time, if you call it interim, then it's also an innovative budget and it's an inclusive budget. It very clearly shows the historical path that Prime Minister Modi's government has followed over the last 9.5, 10 years, where there's been a complete transformation of the economic landscape of India. And when I talk about economic landscape, I'm not talking about just the manufacturing sector or the service sector or the agrarian sector, but really down to the grassroots level. When we talk about the fact that 25 crore people have now come above the poverty line, when we talk about close to 34 lakh crores being transmitted through the DBT program directly to people's bank accounts with no leakages, saving of close to 2.7 lakh crore of government reserves in that process by the creation of 50 crore Jan Dhan accounts. So therefore, there's been a transformation both in terms of the delivery system under Prime Minister Modi and a transformation of lives across the length and breadth of our country. When we talk about minimum government and maximum governance, that's what we intend and that's what we mean. And now we are on the path of 100% saturation. And therefore, all the schemes of the government of India must reach the last mile, last connectivity. And therefore, now if you transition on to my both my ministries, civil aviation as well as steel, what we are looking at is a rapid rollout of infrastructure. In civil aviation, as we speak today, Rahul, I have close to about 6 to 8 terminals that are ready for inauguration. Whether we talk about Pune, we talk about Kolhapur, on the back of Ayodhya, which was just done, and Tiruchirappalli, which was just done last month. Pune, Kolhapur, Jabalpur, Gwalior, Lucknow, the Big Bang terminal coming up in Delhi by the end of February, which will take our capacity to 109 million, second largest terminal in the world. That's where India is reaching today. And similarly in steel, augmentation of steel capacity. We've gone from 80 million tons production to 125 million tons, close to about 100 million tons in terms of capacity to 160 million tons, going up to 300 million tons by 2030. And therefore, we are committed down the path. I couldn't help overhearing our panelist before I joined in officially talking about the PLI scheme. I'd like to just inform him that as far as the PLI schemes are concerned, they have resulted in transformational change across industry verticals in India. I can only talk about the 2 PLI schemes under my remit, one under civil aviation, where we have already dispersed close to about 40% of our budgetary amount over 3 years in year one, close to about 40 crores to 50 crores of 115 crore resource envelope. And we've asked already for a expansion of that PLI for drones. Secondly, in steel as well, the PLI scheme was announced just a couple of months ago. We've had 27 companies with 57 MOUs that have been announced, roughly a resource envelope of about close to 2,500-3,000 crores. I'm following each one of those private sector expansion plans in the specialty steel sector personally on a monthly basis. They're pretty much on track, and we're looking at an augmentation of almost about 20 to 25 million tons per annum in terms of steel capacity, only and only due to the PLI schemes. It has worked wonderfully in electronics, in telecom, and multiple other sectors. So I think it's important that when we look at schemes, there are two ways of looking at them. One is the huge fillip that it may have given that sector. Surely there's much more that we can do, but whether it's semiconductors, whether it's hydrogen, whether it's drones, whether it's specialty steel, we're now looking at VAS. We're looking at value-added manufacturing, value-added services, which was never the case in India. We were more of a commodity-producing country that would sell commodities at their base price. Now we're looking at value-added, where the margin becomes much higher on a global scale.
Minister, how do you respond to the critique, especially from the Congress party, that while public infrastructure spends are going up, spends on social sector, spends on education, spends on healthcare as a percentage of GDP relative to the past have actually come down, that these somehow, just by actual allocation, aren't as important as they used to be in the past? There it is on your screen. Both education and healthcare now getting much less percentage of GDP allocation than in the past.
So I think that those who have never seen transformation on this scale, those that have always talked about 100 rupees being remitted from Delhi and only 15 rupees ending up in the Labharti's account, are the last ones that can talk about efficacy or allocation. The very fact that today you're seeing, if you look across schemes, PM Kisan Samman Nidhi affecting 11 crore 80 lakh farmers, close to about 2.8 lakh crores being transferred straight directly into their bank accounts. Ujjwala Yojana affecting 10 crore women. When you talk about Ayushman card, almost about 28 crore today Labhartis of of Ayushman card, 77,000 crores being spent over the last 9.5 years. Where were these kind of numbers during their time and their period? You talked about outlays, but you never talked about outcomes. And the finance minister very clearly in her budget has said that we are not an outlay-driven budgetary system. We're an outcome-driven. And those outcomes today, Rahul, are in front of you. When we talk about the fact that you talk about PM Awas Yojana, we built close to about 3 crore houses in 65 years. We've now built 4 crore houses in the last 10 years, and we've committed to building another 2 crore houses over the next 5 years. Those are the kind of targets that we are looking at. And that is why there is trust and belief in Modi ki guarantee, because people of India today know that when Prime Minister Modi gives a guarantee, then that's a guarantee that that guarantee of PM Modi is going to be fulfilled. And you're seeing translation of that. We have never seen these numbers before. President Macron, on his recent visit to India, was fascinated by the fact that in Jaipur and near Hawa Mahal, when the Prime Minister went and bought a cup of tea for him on his mobile system and on the basis of Chai Pe Charcha and on the basis of the UPI system, where immediately a payment was done through the mobile system. And now he's asked for that technology to be taken to France. We never manufactured COVID vaccines before. we had 2 vaccines manufactured in India, and we were transporting it to 110 countries through Vaccine Med 3. This is a new India. It's a new India that unfortunately the opposition cannot stomach or come to terms with. But it is a new India that has today risen from an aspirational desire of every Indian to really onto the world stage.
But Minister Sindhia, your
that's
former
the new
colleague,
India, the formidable India that Prime Minister Modi represents.
Ex-Finance Minister P. Chidambaram was with us a short while ago, and he said, look at growth 10 years under UPA, look at growth 10 years under NDA. He says, look at where I left the fiscal deficit, look at where the fiscal deficit is now. The accusation is that the BJP government overplays everything that's happening on their watch and completely dismisses any growth that may have happened on the watch of other governments.
Mr. Chidambaram is a very accomplished Harvard lawyer. It's difficult to constantly argue with him, but if I may be in trying to be in all my humility, I've had a background of being a Harvard economist. Sorry?
I'm saying you can't critique Harvard since you studied there as well. But go on.
I just said that. I said that if I can humbly submit that I'm a Harvard economist. So therefore the problem with Mr. Chidambaram is that he looks at fiscal deficit numbers and he forgets economic theory. And economic theory tells you, whether you look at Keynesian theory or otherwise, that fiscal deficit in itself is not a bad thing, as long as you are spending today on capital expenditure that will yield results tomorrow. And that's what's happened under this government. From a 3 lakh crore capex program of the UPA, you've now ended up at 10 lakh crore capex program for this year, going to 11,111 crores for next year. The country has never seen this kind of public investment in its history of 75 years. And therefore, this CAGR of public investment is what is powering today private investment to come in as well. Because private investment understands that the government is putting its foot forward, whether it's highways, whether it's ports, whether it's airports, whether it's railways, whether it's telecom. And therefore, it's ushering in private investment. One of the major issues we have in our country, thanks to the last 65 years of their government, is high logistic costs. Our logistics costs are close to about 12%. And today, our imperative under Prime Minister Modi, his Gati Shakti program, is to be able to lower logistics costs down to 6 to 7%. And therefore, this huge spend on metros, on highways, because we have to get integration of India, we have to get goods from one end to the other. We've got to be able to export. We've got to be able to import raw material, take it to our factories. That's the whole prerogative. And unfortunately, the Congress is still caught up in a time warp of fiscal deficit logic, which doesn't apply to the current government model of spending on infrastructure, as opposed to their deficit numbers that were implied completely by expenditure on the revenue account, and many hidden subsidies that were never displayed on their deficit numbers, such as the oil subsidies. And that has become completely transparent and accountable today. We've taken it on the chin and showed it in our first 2 years, almost about 8 years ago.
Now, you've been focusing a lot on regional connectivity through the Udan scheme, Minister. And anecdotally, it seems that while some of these new airports are readied, initially we have a flurry of flights on those smaller airports. After a while, for various reasons, and I want to draw you out on this, those flights seem to cease. And then they say, abhi hoga, abhi to nahi hai. Is that something that is concerning you, that you get these new airports going? I don't want to name any 1 or 2 particular airports, but anecdotally and from people who have spoken to, this seems to have happened in a few places. How do you ensure that these new regional airports that you're building actually have regular, assured connectivity and not in fits and spurts?
So, Rahul, I'd love to spend a session on this with you alone. There is so much of concoction of facts that is going on with this argument that, again, the opposition is laying out. Almost about, if I recall correctly, 8 or 10 months ago, I rebutted all of the points that had been put across. We have built 76 airports, heliports, and water drones under the UDAN scheme. All 76 were connected. Of the 76, we've had close to 519, because I inaugurated Dehradun Pithoragarh yesterday with a 19-seater plane, which the CM himself flew in to Pithoragarh. 519 routes that have been operationalized. Under UDAN, you have a viability gap funding model for 3 years. It's a limited period with a sunset clause. If there wasn't a sunset clause, you'd be critiquing me for that. So there is a sunset clause. But I'm very glad to report to you that even post the sunset clause, close to about 30% of the routes are now still plying, which means what? That you build an airport where there was never an airport, or if there was one, it was prior to World War II. You then seed a flight with the viability gap funding. You then start getting anchor customers in terms of people who fly. Over a 3-year period, it then becomes sustainable on its own, and it still carries on. Almost 80 to 85% of our airports that were built under UDAN are still fully connected through either flights that are carrying on over their 3-year period, or those that have completed their 3-year period but are viable in their own right. And many airports are connected now with not only your big ATR and your Boeing 737 and Airbus 320, but I've, as you know, looked at a new UDAN schemes squarely and fairly only for helicopters and only for small planes. And by small planes, I mean sub 20-seater planes. So therefore, cities like Jamshedpur, cities like some cities like in Orissa, Pithoragarh and Dehradun, I've connected with 19-seater planes, because I'm also looking now at last mile connectivity in a hub and spoke model. And therefore, the demand for civil aviation is growing at a huge double-digit CAGR. We had 6 crore flyers in 2014. Pre-COVID, we had 14.5 crore flyers. Last year, I closed at 15.2 crore flyers. And I'm forecasting that by 2030, we will have 30 crore domestic flyers in this country. That's the kind of scale that you're looking at, which is why now you're building bigger metro airports. Goa was the first city where you had double airports. Now you're going to have Mumbai with Navi Mumbai. You're going to have Delhi with Jewar coming up. Delhi airport itself will be the second largest airport in the world. So you're at this, while you're creating the big hubs, you're also creating all the spokes, going off into a Pithoragarh, into a Jamshedpur, into a Jharsuguda, into a Roopsi in Assam, into a Kishangarh in Rajasthan, into a Darbhanga. So that's the model that we are creating as we go forward.
Okay, we leave it over there. It's an aggressive plan, and we wish you best, all the best for the rollout. Thank you very much, Mr. Jyotiraditya Scindia, for joining us and sharing your thoughts on this interim budget. Much appreciated. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So that's the Union Civil Aviation Minister talking about the massive infrastructure push. And this really, especially in areas like the Northeast, which have had such poor and limited infrastructure when it came to aviation or even railways, are actually seeing massive uplifts of the kind that India hasn't seen in decades.
Yeah. But, and Rahul, much needed, because having observed China, once the per capita income crosses $3,500 and $4,000 dollars per year, the air traffic actually gets another huge fillip. And therefore, what he's saying about 30 crore, flyers, in 2030 is very much on. And I think before that, we need all the infrastructure, airport facilities that we can get hold of. And this is the reason for which the Indian carriers have ordered more than 1,000 planes, on Boeing and Airbus. So, aviation, is going to take off, and with it, will also come a lot more multiplier effects on tourism and on other services.
And you can go to parts of your country on holiday where it was otherwise very difficult to get to. Nainalal Kidwai now joins us because one of the key tent poles of whether India succeeds at the speed at which the government hopes for or not is the level of enthusiasm in private companies when it comes to fresh investments. Nainalal Kidwai, your sense of the level of interest in India to go out and invest in the India story away from the words when it comes to actual implementation and actually opening their purse strings?
So there is no doubt in my mind that India as a growth economy is attracting interest. There are very few economies, it goes without saying, that are growing at the rate we are. And because of that, India is and will attract attention. We also know that because of the China Plus One as not necessarily an alternative, but an addition to China as a global supplier, India will and continues to be looked at. I believe that if we are to look at what we are doing here, and logistics figured very high in the interim budget. Logistics has been a bone of contention for many of the investors here because of the costs it takes to move goods through our country. This has rapidly been coming down, and the continued focus, whether on rail, road, and transportation, and the productivity that happens with that logistic investment, the interim budget furthers that mission. It's only making India more attractive and taking care of some of the bones of contention that have existed in the past, namely productivity.
Do you see this actually come down, Dr. Garg? Logistic costs which could make India more competitive?
Of course, logistics is extremely important for the mercantile
Are logistic
economy.
costs coming down at the speed at which they should?
We don't have good data to support it. There's been a recent paper which has been put out by the government side that our actual logistics costs were not around 12%, which was claimed earlier. It's about 8 to 9%, but that has to be seen in the context. What do you define as part of the logistics? What is coming down? Where at this moment, to my mind, we are more doing the logistics building up through Gati Shakti, otherwise the multimodal. So that part, we have to make this or that investment into the transportation, storage, warehouse and other kind of things. That part is going on. It will take some time, and ultimately the cost should come down.
Okay. Nainalal Kidwai, as far as government capital expenditure is concerned, it's 11% up. Were you assuaged by the fact that the finance minister didn't really go out on a reckless populist spree, given the fact that this was election year, elections being announced just in a few weeks from now? That would have been a big concern for anyone, really.
I think it was, Rahul, and I thought that, that it would be hard for them to even stick with the 5.3, although I think there was speculation that they might even try 5.2. But to come in at 5.1% commitment in an election year has to be lauded as responsible behavior. They could have easily got away with the 5.3 they had earlier committed, and economists and others would have been comfortable with that. So what we're seeing here is fiscal profligacy being contained. The desire to chuck a lot of money at people has not indeed played out. And instead, what we're seeing is building blocks for development. And I do think that emphasis on the women programs, bringing forth the successes of the self-help group movement, which is truly amazing. 83 lakh self-help groups, 9 crore women beneficiaries, continued focus in that area. These are the sort of building blocks as we go forward that enable economic engagement of women at the rural level in the growth of the country. And it's a very important building block. And likewise, youth and startups, there's been a lot of focus there, in both in terms of the new fund which has been announced, which I think is much needed. We have struggled with local venture capital type of money. We've relied too much on money that has come from abroad. And to provide this funding, which is interest-free, can be up to 50 years for startups in the more sort of futuristic sectors, is really very, very welcome. And I think is another indication of the commitment that India is making to the startup ecosystem.
Dr. Garg, how do you respond to the criticism from the likes of Mr. Chidambaram and the others that the manner in which the fiscal deficit is being kept under check is actually by spending much lesser than what the budget estimates were, that the announcement was for higher spends on capex or on social sector schemes, but the actual spends were lesser, and that's how the fiscal deficit appears to look under control?
No, the fiscal deficit reduction for the current year is not very much. It was 5.9, it is 5.8 now. And if you go into the further numbers, it's actually 5.84, very close. If you done it, it would have been 5.9. So that's not much control. But what perhaps he was referring to, that the capex, which was suggested to be about 10 lakh crores, has come down by 50,000 crores. But there is also reduction on the revenue side for the next year. Actually, that is where what surprises me, in fact, is that the revenue expenditure is not gone up to the extent of even what the interest expenditures are going. So interest is going up by about 1.5 lakh crores, but revenue is going up only by 1.1 crore. So there is squeeze on the revenue expenditure as well. So, but you are in a very difficult situation because you're already at very high fiscal deficit situation. So whichever way you can bring, by raising revenues or containing the revenue expenditure or not expanding the fiscal, the capital expenditure that much like it was done in a couple of last 3 years. I think that's fine. It's not by sort of not expanding. I don't think government would have loved to save 50,000. Perhaps it was not able to spend, that's why it is there.
Okay, sure. That's also something to look at more from a practical side. It's not like they're trying to scrounge money, it's just that maybe they tried to spend but couldn't. The Modi government is holding out the promise of a Viksit Bharat, or a developed India by 2047. Nana Lal Khidwai, you worked in India, you worked abroad. Is this, given how things are at this moment, a promise that you think is achievable? Or do you think this is more in the form of political rhetoric? Because Viksit Bharat is not just about the size of our economy, it's also about ensuring that every Indian is at a certain basic level of income. Can we be a Viksit country by 2047?
Well, I have no doubt that we will have to be. And it is indeed going to be the demand of our citizens to make sure we are there. There is no doubt also in my mind that the government is seriously committed to this. I see this in some of the work we do with the India Sanitation Coalition in water and sanitation. And there is an absolute commitment to make sure that no one is left behind. In fact, just picking up on that last point, in terms of absorptive capacity of the country to absorb the funds that are put into these systems, we have now in a program with the Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation, where we're bringing in the private sector to ensure that model villages happen. Because what the ministry is saying is we have put the money into the system. We now have to rely on states and gram panchayats to actually implement. And the implementation is not happening at the pace that we would like. So we want partners from the private sector, not for their money, but to ensure that the money is spent to create the model villages, which we want, that have water, sanitation, wastewater, plastic waste management, and that they tick all the boxes to become the model villages we would like them to. And this is called the Lighthouse Initiative. So very serious efforts on the government's part to ensure that states pick up on these programs so the funds that are allocated don't lapse. And I think this is what we have to continue to focus on, not just money that's allotted.
Do you think this is achievable, the idea of a Viksit Bharat by 2047?
Achievable, but will require very hard work. Because India, Rahul, will be the only country in the world history to actually grow exponentially and also reduce its carbon footprint. Nobody else has done it. So what it requires is hugely innovative thinking, out-of-the-box thinking, and very bold thinking, and also all of us coming together. So that development is not just the government's job, but it also, it converts into a sort of a people's movement only then. So, but the numbers are there. If you look at the CAGR, I mean, if you can grow at 9% per annum.
But we're not growing at 9%.
No, we are not. But if we can, and countries have done that for 3 decades.
No, but right now the government seems settling around 7%.
No, but that's what I'm saying. If you settle at 7%, but then you see the other thing comes around that if you take Viksit definition as in terms of PPP terms, then of course it is achievable. Because in PPP terms, getting to $20,000, $25,000, which is the definition of a developed economy, the OECD, you can do that. Surjit Bhalla has shown that. I don't want to go there. But to get but the other option, Rahul, is to provide to the country, to provide to the people the OECD levels of human development indicators at much lower per capita incomes. That to me also is a good definition of a developed economy, and our Kerala model shows that it can be done. Now that again requires a reimagination of what I now call a gross welfare product.
What's your sense, Dr. Garg? At 7%, which is what is looking achievable in the immediate midterm, are we headed towards becoming a developed country by 47?
We should define what we mean by Viksit India. This is not done. Unless we know what it is.
Like a per capita income of at least $20,000 US.
Correct. So something like this. We have a criterion. The World Bank does classify the economies into low, middle, and the high income.
20,000 is the.
So criterion. High income today is about $14,000 per person. We have at 2,500 or so. There is a long gap. There are 87 countries in the world which are in high income bracket already. We need to be there. It's our rightful ambition to go to that. But if you adopt that as a goal, that we will have the cutoff of the high income as the definition of the Viksit Bharat, then we can plan to go there. But it's not an arithmetical sort of calculation that we can, if we grow at 8% or 9%, the whole thing, 25 years or 30 years is a very long time. The world changes. If you go back 25 years from today, we are in 2024. If you go to 1999, what was the world at that time?
Okay, so let me put that question to one of the key ministers in the Modi government. Piyush Goyal now joins us, Minister for Commerce and Industry, and the conversation, Minister Goyal, in the studio is about achieving the target of a Viksit Bharat by 2047. The question was about whether there is a definite sense of what the definition of a Viksit Bharat is and the level of confidence in government to be able to achieve that target by 2047. Before this, no government in India has spoken about making India a developed country in a fixed time frame. This target being laid out for the first time. So the question around how do you define what Viksit Bharat looks like and what's the roadmap to get there? Let's start from there. Minister Goyal, welcome.
Thank you, Rahul. And I'm sure as a business editor also of Business Today, you jolly well know that no plan can ever be achieved unless you have a target, you have a vision to achieve that target, and you have a roadmap how you're going to get there, and a commitment to achieve that. And I would think it's always good to work to a plan. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has steadfastly, whether as Chief Minister of Gujarat or as the Prime Minister of India, always worked very sincerely in every project that he took up, with a commitment to achieve results, a focused effort, huge amount of monitoring, holding people responsible for performance, transparency in his work, technology as the backbone of whatever actions he takes, innovative ideas being implemented on the ground, and saturation without any discrimination so that every section of society rises as the country grows. And I think that's the calling card of Prime Minister Modi. 10 years of consistent good governance, 10 years of improving the lives of the poor, 10 years taking the country from fragile 5, which we inherited, high interest rates, high inflation, low foreign currency reserves, very poor morale of the people, daily corruption scandals, high cost borrowings even to sustain the rupee, with foreign exchange loans being taken. From that situation to 2024, where we have a strong foundation on the back of which we can aspire to be a developed nation. The roadmap is clear, the foundation is in place, the vision is crystal clear, and India will be a developed nation. India will be able to take care of its people. India will be able to provide opportunities to 1.4 billion Indians. I have absolutely no doubt in my mind, and I think the nation today trusts that Modi hai to mumkin hai.
I want to get you to take our viewers through your outlook for exports and imports. And on the budget intelligence dashboard, I just want to show our viewers where things stand at this moment, and then the minister can take us through what he anticipates will happen in the next year, given especially all the geopolitical tensions that we are seeing and the multiple crises, Russia, Ukraine, in the Middle East. So here is exports. I look at total exports to begin with, 776.5 billion in FY23. Till December, 565 billion. If I look in particular at services, services exports, here's the graph coming up from the last 5 years, 325 billion in the last fiscal at 247.9 till December 23. I look at imports just for a moment, and I look at total imports to begin with. As far as total imports are concerned, 896.1 billion in the last fiscal, standing at 634.4 billion till December 23. So let's start with exports. Minister Goyal, given all the tensions internationally and the move away from hyper-globalization, your outlook on India's export story?
First of all, I think your figures need to be corrected. Your services figure for December may not be exactly the right figure. You may like to check that out, point one. Because the December figure has not come out also as yet in the public domain. I think we'll have to wait till you get the exact figure. But having said that, irrespective, by and large, despite all the geopolitical tensions internationally, despite the Red Sea crisis that we are facing right now, our exports of goods and services is roughly flat. We are about $10 billion short as of December. In terms of trade deficit, we've seen a significant improvement as of December. From a trade deficit of over $108 billion, we are, I think, down to somewhere around $65 billion. So I think the situation after the scorching pace of growth of 2 years, where we grew from 490 to 776, which is a 55% growth in only 2 years. It's not really practical to expect that same scorching pace of growth year on year. And I think despite this troubled global geopolitical situation, where we are today looks to be a very good sweet spot for the country, and I'm very confident that we are well on target to go to $2 trillion by 2030.
$2 trillion by 2030, you're saying. I want to draw you into the social sectors. One of the critiques the opposition is flinging your way, Minister Goyal, is about how there is a lot of spending happening on public infrastructure, but their charge is that education and healthcare as a percentage of GDP are receiving lesser outlays than in the past. Their accusation is that on these social sectors, not enough emphasis is being made. How do you respond to that, Minister?
Well, I think it's so sad that some of my friends in the opposition cannot see the reality on the ground. Of course, in terms of the fast pace at which the size of the budget has grown, the percentages are not as important as the absolute number. And in absolute number on every one of the sectors, we see significant growth, point one. Point two, in terms of social spending or welfare spending, I think what this government has done in 10 years is unprecedented. When you had governments which came and went, they never could see that people of India, especially the women, deserve toilets in their home. 110 million toilets have been built so that every home gets a toilet. People would see, I would see my own grandmother cooking on a smoke chula from morning till night. but somehow governments could never recognize and respect the need for everybody to get a cooking gas connection. We made sure that 100 million homes got a free cooking gas connection under Ujjwala, and many more in the regular non-Ujjwala category also. Whether it's 40 million homes being built for the poor, effectively 200 million people getting a good pakka home, and these 40 million families in a way becoming lakpatis, or it is 800 million people being given free food grains. I mean, I can list out a plethora of schemes. Almost 600 million people getting free healthcare. The fact that healthcare facilities during COVID were upgraded across the country, and now we have so many more medical colleges, so many more medical seats, so many more engineering colleges, AIIMS. I mean, the entire country's ecosystem, which will help India become a developed nation, has been given a big fillip in the last 10 years, along with maintaining fiscal prudence. We had planned for 5.9% of the GDP as fiscal deficit. We are at 5.8. So in every respect, this government has demonstrated resilience, has been able to withstand global shocks, and has been able to balance Garib Kalyan, Sushashan, and economic prosperity.
Incidentally, I want to remind our viewers that Minister Piyush Goyal was the interim finance minister in 2019 when the last Modi government presented the budget weeks before elections. And if you remember, at that time, there was the Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi, which came out with an annual expenditure outlay of 75,000 crore rupees, a full tax rebate to those having a taxable income up to 5 lakh rupees. Standard deduction was raised from 40,000 to 50,000. Several measures were taken, none of which have been seen this time round. Is that at some level, Minister Goyal suggested that this government is highly confident we'll be back in July. Abhi karne ki koi zarurat nahi hai. You had presented soon after the BJP was defeated in 3 state elections in the Hindi heartland. So the government at that time potentially was under more pressure. Now you're feeling more confident that, okay, once we come back in July, tab dekhte abhi we don't need to press any panic button or open any populist purse string.
Rahul, first of all, I'll just correct you. The PM Kisan Samman Nidhi was a part of our spending in the then current year, 18-19 itself. So it was launched from December of 18 within the resources of the 18-19 year, and therefore it was, maybe it was announced in the interim budget, but it was a part of a decision taken for the then current year, and resources had been provided for that. So I don't think that the interim budget made too many changes. There were a few changes, some simplifications. Even the 5 lakh scheme, if you recall, was a measure of simplification so that the people get a simplified tax regime also with some benefits. So I think the effort has always been and consistently been to take benefits to the people of India. The form of benefit may change. So this time around, the investment of 11,000 crores on infrastructure is going to provide huge benefit to the middle class, to the common man. After all, it provides opportunities and demand for goods, for services. It provides work opportunities for millions and millions of people. At least a third of that money goes straight into people's hand as wages and salaries. So nearly 2 crore families will benefit directly from that 11 lakh crore rupee investment. Apart from that, the multiplier impact of infrastructure investing. So you'll have steel, cement, electricals, furniture, carpets, all sorts of things. Jobs being created in that. These people who get work or jobs also becoming consumers. So demand again growing. So Make in India getting a fillip. With greater Make in India, greater economies of scale, we become competitive in the international market. PLI supplements that. So it's a very holistic planning that Mr. Modi does, and it is that holistic planning which will make India a developed nation, rest assured.
Thank you very much, Minister Goyal, for joining us. Much appreciate your time.